if you don't know what they are, just spend a couple of minutes and write down whatever you're thinking. And you can probably categorize a few of them as material desires. Kama, krodha, vimuktanam. So to know that we should get free from these, and we just can't give them up. Because trying to give up material desire is also material desire, usually speaking. One thinks of something, when he's on Harinam, and he passes by a cake shop. And immediately the mind says, if you weren't so bound up by being here, if you were not so restrained from being on this Harinam party, if you could give up your false prestige, then you could go into the cake shop and somehow or another try to get a piece of cake. And even though the devotees will criticize you, you should be fearless. And not worry about your false prestige. For the sake of eating that piece of cake, you should be able to sacrifice anything. So then the mind thinks like that, and then you go, oh no, this is very bad, I'm afraid. I'd really like to, but I can't do it because, my false... So this is all within the material realm. Attachment and aversion. To think something is bad, oh no. And then to think it's bad, to think something is bad is also bad. Because anytime we forget about, anytime we get into the realm of mental speculation, which is called viyuddha vikalpa, war against sense gratification, or vishaya sangara, or war against sense gratification and excessive speculation, then the result is that we just forget about Krishna. So we have to accept that intelligence that puts our mind upon Krishna. That we get a higher taste, in other words. Trying to give up lust and anger is just a waste of time without simultaneously trying to focus the mind upon Krishna. The reason why we give up lust and anger is not so we can become liberated from their problems. We give up lust and anger simultaneously by getting the higher taste of becoming Krishna conscious. Otherwise, generally the neophyte, when they're trying to give up lust and anger, become more attached to lust and anger. I shouldn't hate this devotee, although he did so many bad things to me. But now that I remember how many bad things I did for me, against me, then I probably have a good reason why I should hate them. But I shouldn't do that, but actually, because I'm a good person. But I shouldn't be such a good person because, this person is a bad person. And if I was a good person, I'd get rid of this bad person. So, excessive speculation. As soon as we come into the realm of the material energy, what's good and bad in the material world, the dualities, then immediately there's going to be desires of sense gratification and excessive mental speculation. On the other hand, if we simply put it aside, nirmanta eva, jnane priyasam udapasta namanta eva, this is Lord Brahma's advice. Give up the desire for excessive speculation. We're not going to solve anything by it. We're not going to make any progress. We're not going to do anything useful for ourselves and anyone else. Jnane priyasam udapasta namanta eva. And become a little humble. Yes, there are so many bad things going on in the material world. Yes, there's so much injustice. Yes, I should try, but be a little humble and realize that we're not the super soul. We didn't come to this material world to solve all material problems. And nor can we solve any problems, except the real problem is that we've forgotten about Krishna. And because we've forgotten about Krishna, everything else is the problem. Jivanti sanmukharitam bhavadiya vardam. And therefore we should hear from the great devotees how to become Krishna conscious. Stani stita. There's no need to change anything. Whatever our duties are, whatever we can do to serve Krishna, We'll just do that. It doesn't matter if we're a man or a woman, or if we're the temple commander or the dishwasher. It doesn't really matter what we're doing. Just do it to please Krishna. Try to cultivate a sense of trying to please Krishna while we're doing this service. Then, Shruti-gatam tanuvangman nobira. We should always remember what it says in Scripture. We should see through the eyes of Scripture. We should see how Krishna, as they'll say here, that everything here belongs to Krishna. So I have nothing to gain. It doesn't matter whether I get into this imagination, this idea that something is mine, including this body, but actually it's not mine, it's Krishna's. And it's not meant, there's nothing I could do in this material world with this body that's actually going to make me happy. I may gratify my senses and get some temporary relief from the pushings of my senses and my mind, but that's not real happiness. That's simply temporary relief from the misery coming from lust, anger, and greed, and the delusion of my false ego. And that Krishna is a real friend. He's my friend. He's everyone's friend. And if I become an instrument for Krishna, then I'm acting for my own good and for everyone else's good. If I let Krishna do the driving, as they say in America, we let him take over, then I can actually be doing something good for myself and others. And Krishna takes over when we become engage our body, mind, and words, and according to the directions of our acharyas and their representatives. Then when I'm absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then we're actually entering into the spiritual world. The more we're thinking about Krishna, the more our consciousness expands in Krishna consciousness, the more our mood develops into the loving service to Krishna, then the more I enter into the spiritual realm of existence, even while one is in the material body. And everything else that doesn't lead to that may, if we're advancing in the Varnashram system, at least we're doing things towards the mode of goodness, we're remembering at least to wash our hands before we eat. Oh, that's better than looking at them and saying, well, they look pretty clean, no problem. And then after we eat, then, anyhow, there's a few bits left, but, I might get hungry later. So it's not a bad idea. I'm not going to wash my hands. Besides, the sink is at least 15 yards, and I'm too tired to get up there. So at least we get up and we wash our hands before and after. We're making some advancement towards the mode of goodness. So that's better. But better than that is to try to see things in relation to Krishna. To remember that actually Krishna owns everything here, and I should utilize his energies, whatever I was in my sphere of influence, I should utilize it to please him. And that way I'll actually be doing something beneficial for myself and everyone else. So that will be the conclusion of this chapter. And then the next chapter we'll get into will be about the perfection of the mechanical process, which will lead to the same conclusion. That is, yoginam api sarvesham madgiten antaratmana sharavan labate jamam samay yuktatmo mataha. That of all the yogis, one who is always thinking of me with great transcendental service, who's intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. The yogi who's always thinking of me with great and transcendental love, is it? Who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, great faith, and always abides in me. So that's about the same thing. I think it's prema, or some kind of. The yogi who always thinks of me with great and transcendental faith, always abides in me, renders transcendental loving service to me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. Is most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. But then finally we'll get into the 7th chapter, beginning of the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, where we just have to hear about Krishna. Now we think that just hearing about Krishna is just an ordinary process. I should be doing something more practical like pranayama, or maybe asana, or something like that. Just hearing about Krishna, I've been hearing about Krishna for so long, and I'm still in the material concept of life. Well, we have to have also faith. Maya asakta manak partha yogam yunjan marashaya asamshayam samagramam itagyasisitashino. In other words, asamshayam samagramam. Give up these doubts which arise from false ego. As long as we're attached to this false ego, as long as we won't let go, as long as we don't want to understand that we're actually souls, not bodies, then Krishna consciousness is very, very theoretical. Then whatever we're hearing about sounds like a fairy tale. And that the reality we think we're seeing in front of us. This is the real world where people eat and they sleep and they mate and defend. And this other world, who knows? The world of never, never land. And therefore we never can go inside because anyone who is attached to their false ego and won't give it up, even for a moment, put it aside and become submissive, then they have to live in this world. Because instead of Krishna being their dear, most intimate friend, their false ego is the thing that they're most attached to, that they just can't give up. People will sacrifice their lives in a battle. They'll give away all their wealth in charity. They'll go through great austerities, but they won't give up their false ego. It's all to serve their false ego. But if one can actually give up their false ego and identify themselves as Krishna's servant, then they're actually doing the greatest benefit for themselves and everyone else. They're the actual heroes of this world. But obviously it's not so easy to do that, especially all the time. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions?
Hare Krishna. In the verse about giving up endeavors for the speculative process of knowledge spoken by Brahma, Srila Prabhupada translates this Sanmukharitam as hearing from the great realized devotees. So then how many of us can speak Krishna Katha if it's only to hear from great, not only realized but great realized, not only great but also great realized devotees? So
so let's say we're not great and we're not realized, self-realized, but we have some realization, and therefore we can be as effective as we've understood the philosophy. So it's summarized, Acharya mam vidaniyam nava manita karija, that an actual real Acharya is one of those great souls, and they're either considered to be a personal associate of Srimati Radharani or a direct manifestation of Lord Nityananda, His mercy. But how many of that's an exalted personality. Now, on the other hand, we have Krishna, Shiksha Guru Ke Ta Krishnara Swarup, Antaryami Bhakti Shrestha Seduri Rup. That one should know the Shiksha Guru as a representative of Krishna. The Antaryami, the super soul, as well the Bhakti Shrestha, the best of the devotees, he's a manifestation of that Shiksha Guru. The Prabhupada said in the purport that there are two kinds of Shiksha Gurus. One of them is the self-realized soul, the Vayamita to Krishna, who brings the spiritual world and tells you what Krishna wants you to hear. And he tells you with pure potency of Krishna consciousness. He sees everything objectively. But there's another kind of Shiksha Guru. He's followed the previous acharyas, And to some extent, he's gotten some realization, some purification. He has some experience in Krishna consciousness. And he can tell us how to come at least to the point in the path towards Krishna that he's arrived or she's arrived. Now, if we're on a lesser point or a previous point to that path that he's arrived, then he can give us guidance how to at least get to that path. So there's value. But the Acharya, in the true sense of the term, who's authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. So ultimately, there's a difference. And Prabhupada therefore writes, these are the things we have to know when we're dealing with devotees. Who's on what level? First of all, we should know who's on. Interesting enough, our first business is to know who's on what level, because it's much easier to figure out where others are at than it is to figure out where we're at. We're much more discriminating against dealing with others than we are with our own self. So our first business is to learn how to discriminate between who's on what level. And then after that, we should try to figure out what level we're actually on. If we don't do that, we're just lost. We're not going anywhere in devotional service if we can't do that. Then all we're doing is speculating. Of course, even if we try to do that, we're going to speculate less, that's all. We'll see more and speculate less. Now, Srila Prabhupada writes that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us a hint to how to know who's actually an Uttama Adhikari, by one's ability to convert others into devotees. So that would be pretty easy. You just count the number of disciples someone has, and if they have a bigger number, they must be closer towards the Uttama Adhikari. But there's something called the quality of their disciples too. To actually convert someone to become a Vaishnava, first of all, you have to be a Vaishnava. And to be a Vaishnava is not so easy, one who's actually in love with Krishna. But we can see that the ability to help others on the path, the quality, is also an indication who's at least approaching the higher levels of devotional service. The clearer the message, as in a conversation between Gopinath Acharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he said, what is the proof that you've actually obtained the mercy of Krishna, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of the Lord? And remember what Gopinath Acharya's response was? Because I'm able to explain it. Because unless I was able to explain it, how could I get without Krishna's mercy, I couldn't explain it. So, then Prabhupada said, one should not become a spiritual master unless he's obtained the stage of Uttama Adhikari. Then an intermediate devotee, a neophyte devotee, and an intermediate devotee could also make disciples, but such disciples should be on the same level. And it should be understood that they cannot advance very well due to his insufficient guidance. Therefore, one should be careful to accept an Uttama Adhikari as one's spiritual master. So we should be careful to not, even if we become an instructor to others, we shouldn't become deluded into thinking, because I'm an instructor, therefore somehow or another that's made me more advanced. Actually, there's every possibility of puffing up our false ego and keeping us on the same level or degrading us. And others also may be deluded into thinking that because this person has a position, therefore he has the qualifications. It's like if I get elected to a position, that doesn't mean that necessarily I automatically acquire the qualifications of that permission, of that service or position. So one has to see things from many points of view. In other words, for the disciple, he should see the spiritual master as the representative of God. If he doesn't see that, then how can he give up his false ego? And before one takes initiation, one should be willing to accept the representative, the person I'm taking initiation from, as a representative of Krishna. If I don't, then it becomes meaningless. It's a waste of time because I won't give up my false ego. And without giving up our false ego, we just remain on the material platform. Devotional service doesn't begin until we give up our false ego. On the other hand, I should not think myself to be a great devotee just because I'm instructing. I'm acting as a media to some extent by repeating the words of the great devotees. And others, for instance, shouldn't become deluded either if they have a position of trying to help me advance in devotional service. For instance, my godbrothers, they shouldn't think because this person is, has a particular position, therefore they're unapproachable. They can't be corrected. Or as Vaishnav Prabhu gave one lecture, he said, I live to be corrected. So that should be, the godbrothers and sisters should try to help the person, because otherwise they'll get lost. Because if they accept, which is bona fide, the position of an instructor, and their followers have to worship them, have to respect them, or else they'll get zero from his instructions. The satisfaction of the self-realized person is the secret of advancement in devotional service. So trying to satisfy those who are giving us knowledge is the secret of advancement. Otherwise we won't understand anything at all. And even someone may not, from an objective point of view, be self-realized, but if they're acting as an instrument for Krishna, and anyone who's actually serving the instructions coming down in disciple succession, to one degree or another, are under the internal energy of Krishna. Because either we're serving Krishna's instructions, or serving Maya's instructions, or sometimes there may be a combination of both. But if I'm taking instructions from someone, and I don't honor them and serve them appropriately, then I won't serve their instructions. If I don't serve the instructions, I don't make any advancement. Then the knowledge becomes useless. So we have to see things from any point of view, or else we get, either you're a god or you're a dog. So that's one of the problems. Some of our devotees, they had the position of instructing and also initiating gurus, but somehow or another they weren't on the highest platform and they got bewildered. And many times after they fell down, people just negated everything they told and did beforehand, which is just a mistake. When they're under the internal energy, whatever they're doing could be more or less perfect to some degree. But when they had difficulty, then what they're doing should not be emulated or followed. So either we could be in the spiritual energy and everything we're doing is perfect, but one moment we may fall down. So one should not criticize, or especially what people were doing right, what the devotees were doing right. We should appreciate what they were doing right and understand that when they get into difficulty, then they're being corrected by Krishna, so whatever they were doing wrong will be rectified, and therefore in the future they'll only do things right again. And the greatest methodology of advancement is to make someone humble. So after someone has some trouble and they become humble, then they make the greatest advancement they could possibly do under the circumstance. Amadi, Bhamadambi, Bhamahimsa, humility is the basis, and generally people lose their humility when they're put into too much, when they get too much praise and too much material resources, they become bewildered by it. So then when it's all taken away, then they become humble again. They start making significant advancement again. Hopefully. Because some people, they get into difficulty and they blame everyone else for it. And therefore Krishna has to keep on arranging to eventually make them humble again. Anything else? Okay, yes.
this humility and discrimination, can you explain a bit more? Because it sometimes seems that the one who is humble won't bother to discriminate too much from whom to take orders. And I mean, how does it go together?
That's not humility.
Yeah.
That's foolishness. One is a fool, and many times he's humble too. Just like a Shudra is a fool, and he's usually humble. But if he's not humble, then he's a Buddha. But the Brahmin, when he has knowledge, he's genuinely humble. Because he understands I'm 1/10,000th the size of the tip of his size, and Krishna is unlimited. And everyone else is acting in some way or another as an instrument for Krishna. So he has no choice but to be humble. If you're 1/10,000th the size of the tip of his size, and you realize it, it's really hard to become too proud. And if you realize there's a person who's everywhere, and he's unlimited, then, comparison to him, one is insignificant, eternally. So where is the question of becoming proud? Is that right? And just humility because someone's better than you is better than being puffed up. But when there's a difference between that and realizing the person who's actually better than everyone, then you're definitely going to be unlimitedly humble. You may realize that someone is better than you in something and become a little humble. But when you realize there's someone who's better than you in everything, better than everyone in everything, then you really become humble. Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol.